Ethan Caldwell wasn't the type to frequent places like this. The small diner tucked away on a quiet street, far from the hustle and bustle of the city, felt like a relic from another time. He had a penchant for luxury, for the finest restaurants and private lounges, but tonight, he wanted something different. His life had been one of endless meetings, deals, and expectations, and somewhere along the way, it had become suffocating. The weight of his success, the constant pressure, was starting to gnaw at him. So, he chose this simple diner, a place where the world didn't feel like it was constantly closing in on him. As he stepped inside, the scent of fresh coffee and warm grease hit him. The diner was humble, with retro vinyl booths and a counter where a few regulars chatted quietly. The soft hum of an old jukebox filled the background, adding a sense of nostalgia to the place. He liked the simplicity of it all. The neon sign outside flickered, a few lights overhead buzzed, but there was an undeniable charm to the faded tiles and creaky floorboards. The diner's charm wasn't in its decor, but in its authenticity. This was a place where nothing felt forced, where people came for comfort, not flair. Behind the counter stood Sarah Wells, a woman in her late 20s with dark brown hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her eyes, though tired from a long shift, still carried warmth. Ethan caught her glance as she wiped down a few glasses, her movements calm and fluid. There was an ease about her, a quiet energy that drew him in. He ordered a coffee, his usual go-to drink, and she returned a smile, taking the order without missing a beat. Ethan wasn't sure why he was there. Something about Sarah's quiet grace intrigued him. He was used to people who played the part of success, always striving to look perfect, to impress. But Sarah didn't need to do any of that. She simply existed in the moment, and it was a stark contrast to his own frantic life. As the minutes ticked by, Ethan found himself settling into the routine of the diner. His phone buzzed on the table, but he ignored it. This moment, simple and unassuming, was exactly what he needed. Little did he know, it was also the beginning of something that would change everything. The next evening, Ethan returned to the diner, driven by a curiosity he couldn't quite explain. The allure of the quiet simplicity was still there, but now it felt like there was something more, a connection to a world he'd long forgotten. As he pushed open the door, the familiar jingle of the bell overhead sounded, and Sarah looked up from behind the counter, offering him the same warm smile that had greeted him the night before. "You're back," she said, almost with a hint of surprise. "I didn't expect to see you so soon." Ethan took a seat at the counter, his eyes following her movements as she prepared a fresh pot of coffee. There was something so effortless about the way she worked. It was as if the diner had been built around her calm, a place where chaos could swirl, yet she remained untouched by it. He couldn't help but admire the quiet strength she exuded. "I couldn't stay away," Ethan replied, his voice softer than usual. "I needed a change of pace. This place, it's different." Sarah set a steaming mug of coffee in front of him, her eyes catching his for a moment. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "I know what you mean. Most people come in here because it feels like home. No pretenses, just a good meal and good company." Ethan nodded, his thoughts drifting. "I can see that. It's refreshing." The conversation lulled for a moment, as they both fell into a comfortable silence, the only sound the occasional clink of silverware and the soft murmur of patrons chatting in the background. It was a rare moment for Ethan, one that reminded him of simpler times, before the weight of wealth and status had overshadowed everything. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed something so simple, so genuine. But then, the peace was shattered. The door swung open with a harsh gust of wind, and three men dressed in dark clothes and ski masks stormed in. One of them brandished a gun, his voice sharp and commanding. "Everyone down. Now." The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The regulars froze, their hands trembling. Ethan's heart raced, but his instincts kicked in. He glanced over at Sarah. She didn't flinch. She didn't even seem scared. Instead, Sarah calmly stood up from behind the counter, her hands raised slowly. "No need to panic," she said in a calm, controlled voice. "Just do what they ask, and everything will be fine." Ethan watched, mesmerized. There was a serenity in her presence that cut through the tension. While everyone else around them was on edge, Sarah remained poised, almost as if she were immune to the chaos unfolding. He couldn't understand it. Why wasn't she scared? The robber turned his attention to her, his voice harsh. "You think you're in control here?" Sarah met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not trying to control anything," she said. "But I know that if we all stay calm, no one has to get hurt." Ethan was stunned. She was standing up to a man with a gun, and yet, her voice didn't waver. There was no fear in her eyes, only a calm determination. It was the kind of bravery that Ethan had never expected to see in someone like her. In that moment, he realized just how extraordinary she truly was. The robbery continued, but as Sarah led the robbers through their demands with a quiet confidence, Ethan knew one thing for sure: this was not just another ordinary woman. And whatever happened next, he wanted to know more. The robbery ended as quickly as it had begun. The masked men, having taken what they came for, made their hasty exit, leaving behind only a trail of fear and unanswered questions. But in the aftermath, the diner was calm. No one had been hurt, no one had screamed, and for reasons Ethan couldn't explain, no one seemed to be in a rush to leave. The regulars, still in shock, sat silently in their seats, their faces pale but relieved. Sarah, however, was already at the counter, wiping down a cup as if nothing had happened. Her hands were steady, her movements slow and deliberate. It was as though the chaos had never touched her. Ethan couldn't stop watching her, this woman who had faced a dangerous situation with the kind of calm he'd only ever seen in people who had been through far more than they should have. It was as if she had seen the worst of the world and had chosen not to be afraid of it anymore. Ethan hesitated for a moment before standing up. He couldn't leave just yet. He walked to the counter, where Sarah was still busy, and cleared his throat. I don't think I've ever seen someone handle a situation like that. You were incredible." Sarah looked up from the counter, her expression unchanged. "I've had worse," she said simply, her voice soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself more than to him. Ethan frowned, trying to process her words. Worse? He didn't know what he expected, but it certainly wasn't this kind of nonchalance. Sarah nodded, her eyes flicking to the window as she placed the mug down with care. "I've worked here long enough to know that things can go wrong. People get desperate. It's not the first time something like this has happened." She paused, meeting his gaze. "But panicking doesn't help. Never has. You deal with what you can, and you try to make it out of the situation in one piece." Ethan was taken aback. There was a quiet wisdom in her words that he hadn't expected. He had spent his life in the high-stakes world of business, where every decision could make or break you. But this was different. Here, in this tiny diner, Sarah had shown him something that no amount of wealth or power could teach him: true resilience. "I don't understand," Ethan admitted, his voice low. "How do you stay so calm?" Sarah's eyes softened as she met his gaze. "You learn that calm is the only thing you can control. Everything else, money, power, even fear, is outside of your hands. But how you react, that's on you." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He had known many strong people in his life, people who could face challenges head-on with tenacity. But Sarah's strength was different. It was quiet, unshakable, and entirely her own. And in that moment, something inside Ethan shifted. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to her, this woman who had the power to change everything without ever raising her voice. For the first time in years, Ethan found himself questioning his path. The world he had built was full of noise, of empty pursuits. But Sarah, she was a stark reminder that there was more to life than just survival. There was purpose, there was meaning, and there was peace. "I need to know more about you," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. I think you're the one I've been looking for. Sarah's eyebrows furrowed, and for the first time, she seemed taken aback. What do you mean? Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. I think it's time I started living differently. The following weeks unfolded in a blur for Sarah. After that night, things at the diner slowly returned to normal. The regulars trickled in and out, the jukebox played its familiar tunes, and Sarah kept the same calm, steady routine she always had. But in the back of her mind, something had shifted. She hadn't forgotten Ethan's words, nor the way he had looked at her, like she was something more than just a waitress in a small-town diner. His words had left an imprint, an unanswered question hanging in the air, why me? Ethan had not returned to the diner after that night. Sarah didn't expect him to. People like him, the rich, the powerful, they didn't belong here. But a part of her, the part she didn't let show to anyone, wondered what he had really meant when he'd said he was looking for something. Or rather, someone. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, one she almost ignored, but something told her to pick it up. Sarah Wells, a voice on the other end asked. Yes, she replied cautiously. This is Ethan Caldwell, the voice continued. I know this may seem sudden, but I wanted to offer you something. I've been thinking about you, about what you did that night. You're extraordinary, and I think you deserve more than the diner life. I want to offer you a job, a real opportunity. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, didn't even know how to respond. A job, she repeated, almost unsure of what she was hearing. Yes, Ethan answered, his voice calm but urgent. I need someone like you, someone who doesn't crack under pressure. I've got a new project, and I think you'd be perfect for it. I'll even match your current salary to start, and offer you something far more than what you have now. It's your choice. Her thoughts raced. The diner had always been her home, her sanctuary, but this was something she couldn't ignore. Thank you, she said, her voice wavering. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything yet, Ethan replied. Just think about it. I'll leave it up to you. The line went silent for a moment before Ethan added, you'll never know if you don't take the leap. The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah sat with the decision, weighing the comfort of the life she knew against the unknown possibilities Ethan's offer represented. She had always prided herself on making decisions slowly, carefully. But as she looked out the window of the diner, the familiar sights no longer seemed enough. She realized she was ready for something more. And so, she made her decision.